with us tonight, including founders and execs from Tempo, Aura, Levels, as well as the team from Signal Fire. So thanks so much, you guys, for joining us. We're going to get started in just a second, but yeah, really excited to be here. Awesome. So with that, we're going to get
Thanks.
it all kicked off.
I was just
Thanks
gonna
a lot,
say
Harpreet, for being
thanks for having us, Josh. Appreciate it.
definitely. All right, let's get it started. Welcome to Signal Fire's Future of Fitness show, where we're going to be discussing some of the biggest trends in the future of connected healthcare, how gadgets and new hardware are going to make being fit a lot easier, and what we're going to expect to see next, what startups still need to be built in this space. I'm joined by an incredible lineup this evening, including founders and execs from the top fitness hardware companies, as well as investors from Signal Fire who are investors in Tempo. And so with that, I want to kick it off straight off by throwing it to you, Moawia, the founder and CEO of Tempo, the home smart screen gym. You have the most amazing story of maybe all of the founders I've met in my 10 years as a journalist and now as a VC. Your story really stuck out to me for just the perseverance of how you actually, picked yourself up by your bootstraps, not literally just bootstrapping a company, but literally coming out of maybe the most dire circumstances to build an incredible company and solve the problem that you had yourself. So maybe you could just start us off, Moya, by telling us a little bit about your journey from going to starting this company, Tempo.
Thank you for having me, Josh. Yeah, so let's go back a bit into the origins of it all. So, we immigrated to the U.S. when I was about 8 years old, and the main reason we immigrated here was my brother was born with a medical condition, and basically the doctors told us that if we stayed here in Egypt, he would die. And it really stuck to us. We knew this wasn't just hypothetical because actually my mom's brother had the same medical condition and he passed away by the time he was the age of 1. So we knew this was really, really serious. So my dad just sold everything and all we did was we were able to afford our flight. We got to New York and we said, let's figure it out. All that mattered was we lived very close to a hospital so we can take my brother anytime to the hospital. And his medical condition is basically he can't sweat. So the body doesn't have, um, you know, the sweat glands that you need to sweat. So because Egypt's weather is really, really dry and the temperature is really hot, it was really damaging for their skin and they wouldn't be able to survive here. And the reason we actually needed to be very close to hospitals the whole time was if they ever get a fever, they will end up getting a seizure and very quickly can basically pass, they'll pass away. So we always just had to live 1 block away from a hospital, and that's kind of what we did. We found a place, and my dad really, we just didn't know what you need to do in the US to make it. All that we cared about was my brother could now be healthy and well. And, I started going to school a bit, and my dad kept working. And honestly, it was just like he was working 2 jobs, and I'm just used to working because we lived on a farm and it's just like I have to participate in one way or another. So I started working after school, and there was no guidance. So when I went to school, I was like, I'm really not learning anything here. I don't speak English. None of my, we don't know anyone who can help us. And I saw my dad struggling. So I just basically, the amount of time I went to school decreased and kept working more and more and more. And I just was really happy. I was like, I'm making $20 a day plus tip, delivering pizza and cleaning up in the restaurant, and I just felt very proud. And we did that for many years, and we were all happy. My brother was actually alive; he was doing well. He started going to school, and just to be able to see that, we felt very satisfied, and it really didn't matter. And about 4 years, when I was supposed to be able to start going to high school, our there was a boiler that was getting repaired, and it exploded, and my mom just got out in time with my brother, and everything burned, and it went away. And honestly, we're very relieved because I remember 4 days before that, I was sitting with my dad and he was saying, Moy, we have about $400 and I don't think I could, we'll be able to pay rent this month. And we're trying to think of like, what should we do? And I remember after me and him just looking like, well, it's gone. We can keep the $400 we had. And we're kind of relieved because it was just such a constant struggle every day and every week. And all of life, we just kept thinking, how do you get by another day? How do you pay for food? How do we pay for rent? And
Wow.
that's, it was just like constantly your whole life thinking about that. So we were homeless, and it was honestly the best thing that happened to us at that point, because the Red Cross put us in a shelter. Where rent was free, and they forced my dad to get food stamps. So my dad was completely against food stamps. He came from a world where he was like, you have to work for every single dime. For if you want to be able to afford something, you have to work for it. Nothing should come for free in life. And obviously, they said, here are your food stamp cards. Here's how much you get for food. Rent was free, and my dad was like, what do we do now? Like, we've lived our whole life every day trying to get basically these two things, and now they were both offered to us. So my dad actually went to a whole training program, and then he became a special education teacher. And at that time, it was like, I don't have to work anymore to get by. So what should I do with my life? At this point, I should have been in ninth grade. I missed all of elementary and middle school, and we didn't again know how do we get started. So I said, let me go to this local YMCA. And I was very attracted by the ping pong sets that they had in the front door. And I wanted to get learning to play ping pong. And I kept playing over there day after day and after day. And then these trainers just saw me, and they're like, man, you come to the gym every single day and you never even enter inside the gym. So they pulled me in, they got me into the gym and got me working out. And, you know, 2 months later, they're like, you're getting bigger. And I remember looking at the mirror, I'm like, man, I absolutely look just as tiny and skinny as I was. I'm not bigger, but if they think I'm bigger, then I'm definitely bigger and I'm definitely better. So they kept pushing me further. And I remember it was like almost September, and they're like, wait, you're still here all day. Aren't you going to school? And I was like, no, I'm not going to school. I haven't been to school. And I don't know how to start. And that basically like really took them back. They're like, look, there is no way we're going to train you. The only way we train you is if you can get back to school. We train you for free. We charge $150 an hour. We're training you for free only if you go back to school. And they actually found like this private high school that was near the YMCA that was willing to accept me. And they said, look, you don't have any track record. There are no records of you. So either you come and like, if you pass and graduate, great, we'll give you a diploma. If you don't, we've never accepted you, nothing happened. And honestly, the amount of support I received, like teachers would stay before school, and I'd work with them for two hours. There was after school that teachers had made for me, and then there was weekend classes. And within 3 years, I was able to graduate, and just finally, I was finally really bigger. And I finally saw what the trainers said they were seeing about 3 years ago. And it was awesome, because at that point I'd like really got very passionate about fitness, and honestly it was the early signs of seeing progress that made me feel like it's not too late in life. I'd like at that point I'm like, I'd missed all these years. There's definitely no way to go back to school. There's no hope. I kind of just have to find a job, and that's what I'm going to do for life. And the results at the gym just made me really like start actually believing in myself that it's not too late in life. And then I was getting making progress in school. And 3.5 years later, I became a personal trainer after graduating from high school, and I started training, and that's how I paid for college. And amazing enough, my co-founder and CTO now, Josh, he was one of my clients, so I was charging $150 an hour to. And
That's
I
amazing.
told him, at that time, Josh, I really don't give a shit about you and anybody else who can afford $150 an hour. I want to be able to, be what those trainers were for me at a time when I really couldn't afford anything. How can I be able to make personal training a lot more accessible and affordable and get it to so many more people? And I believe I told them at the time, I'm like, I want, after I graduate, I want to be able to train 10,000 people at the same time. And from that point on, we started working on like, how do we, like, how could this work? I started building Spider-Man suits. I thought, that's kind of going to be the future. It's going to be sensors all over your body. And Josh completely believed in computer vision. He's like, Moya, as a trainer, you're using your eyes. Like, that's what I'm paying for. You've seen so many other people. If we're going to actually be able to scale personal training and be able to offer something that people can trust. Like, a big part of training is, do you trust the trainer to get you to where you want to get? And he's like, if we give a computer eyes, and a computer can really get a lot better at pattern matching and will be able to see so many more people, that we can ultimately build a much better personal trainer than you ever can be, Moya. And that really stuck with me. And he built a prototype that like sold me in a second after just doing one squat in front of it. And I was like, oh man, it's at the same time, it's like the barbell is 2 degrees off, your knees are going over your toes by 2 centimeters. All of these like feedbacks triggered. I'm like, wait, what? I can't even see that as a human being. And those two things like sparked the journey that then started to become Tempo today.
That's an incredible story, to go from immigration to being homeless to becoming a personal trainer to pay your way through college, and then wanting to democratize access to that training through Tempo. And you've done a remarkable job of it. This screen, which has machine vision built into it, can actually detect your form. It can tell if your knees are too far back or forward. It can tell the posture problems when you're working out right from home, just like a trainer would. And that, I think, is one of the most interesting parts about this, is that you're bringing the sort of the health and safety that you get from having a real person, but you're making that accessible to a much wider audience. Is that kind of the problem you wanted to solve? And then you recently had some big news. So what happened? What's the most recent part of the story?
Yeah, so we pretty much got there. Like the product today is, can see you, can track you, can give you feedback as you're working out. And what I'm very excited about is that, the average trainer, and not by average, I mean like a trainer at an elite like training facility or gym, has seen about 270 hours of training experience that they have. And Tempo today has seen over 40,000 hours and has perfect recollection of that, and over 5 million workouts. And there is no personal trainer in the world that has that amount of experience on their CV. And by CV here, I mean resume, not computer vision. So like we've built the best personal training product, and we finally shipped it. And, the product launched in February of 2020, and the company has seen 10x growth. We went from zero in revenue in 2020 to about 85 million run rate by the end of the year. And what's been honestly the most incredible thing for me is that we've changed the fitness landscape, in that, out of 100 people that join a gym in January, about 80 of them will probably stop going to the gym 2 months later. And we've changed that equation completely. At basically about 80% of people who've purchased the Tempo continue using the Tempo weekly. And that is basically flipping the equation upside down in terms of like this product works. And by having it at home, we're seeing people are working out a lot more than they ever did with a gym membership.
Yeah, I think that's what's so amazing about that, is that when the product can sort of come home with you, it becomes so much more convenient when you don't have to go somewhere else to actually learn about how you could improve your fitness and to actually execute on that. It just gets so much simpler, and you'll do it a lot more. I mean, I'm a procrastinator. I know that sometimes I wouldn't make it to the gym, even if it's only 15 minutes away. Suddenly I'm like, oh, well, take too long to get there and back. I just won't go today. And that never happens with Tempo. And I think that brings up this concept of convenience and having that sort of data insight into your own fitness. And that's where I want to bring you in, Dr. Casey Means, one of the co-founders of Levels, a metabolism sensor and glucose monitor, which can really help you understand how different types of food affect you. And I think that that's so cool, because we get so little insight about like what happens to food after we put it in our body. We might know how many calories we consume, but like that's pretty much it. And normally, having any real data on this would require really serious work with like a nutritionist and doctor. So Casey, maybe you could just give us a quick understanding of why Levels is solving this problem and making understanding of your own fitness more convenient.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Josh. And thank you so much for sharing your story, Moawia. So the origin of Levels really comes from this core thesis that closed loop biofeedback is incredibly powerful for behavior change and for optimizing performance, and that individuals should really be the owners of our own health data and use it, how we'd like to. And with nutrition, it's always been sort of this infuriatingly open loop system. You'll eat something and it's incredibly difficult to know whether that food is actually good for you or not. You might, eat something and then weigh yourself the next day and be a pound heavier. You might get a cholesterol test in 6 months, but creating that one-to-one relationship between an individual food choice and a health outcome has been virtually impossible. So levels fixes this. Levels cuts through that nebulous confusion of nutrition by creating a program where members use a continuous glucose monitor, which is a wearable that gives real-time feedback on how your diet is impacting this key internal metabolic biomarker, and pairs that information with our software that interprets that glucose data stream and makes it highly actionable and easy to interpret. So it's really the first time we've essentially had a lab on our arm. And when we eat, we can say 20, 30 minutes later, an hour later, like, yes, this was a good choice for me. This is supporting my health and performance and fitness, or it's not. And big picture, above and beyond really tailoring our diet for fitness and performance, it's also a bigger picture thing. It's never been more important for us to have more insight on how our diets and lifestyles are affecting us, because we're dealing with a chronic disease epidemic that's caused by poor diet and lifestyle. And it's so absurdly monumental and so normalized that we're almost blind to it. Right now, as an American adult, it's actually almost inevitable that you will become chronically ill. 88% of American adults have metabolic dysfunction. And, that can show up anywhere in the body. It can look like fatigue. It can look like poor exercise endurance. It can look like hunger. It can look like poor sleep. It can look like weight gain. And then, of course, more seriously, it can look like obesity, heart disease, cancer, infertility, Alzheimer's, dementia, anxiety, depression, so much more. And these all seem like different things. Like, how is poor exercise endurance related to Alzheimer's, dementia, which might be related to depression? But fundamentally, metabolism is how we convert food to energy in the body. And all of these conditions share a common root cause, which is that our metabolism is dysfunctional. And that means that we are having trouble producing energy efficiently from our food. And the why behind this is because our cellular biology has really been at scale hijacked by being overloaded with our industrialized processed food system, with mountains of sugar, with sedentary behavior. And the average person today is eating about 150 pounds of refined sugar per year. About 200 years ago, we were eating about 1 pound of refined sugar per year, 150 times more. That breaks the system. And so the absolute lowest hanging fruit for improving our metabolic health, improving these processes that let us generate energy effectively, which is important for the athlete and important for the person trying to avoid chronic illness, is to keep our blood sugar levels stable, to keep them healthy. And the beautiful thing is we now have a tool that can do that. It's a continuous glucose monitor. It's available. It's an FDA-approved device. And our thesis is that when people are aware of what's happening inside their own bodies, they can make better choices to optimize their health. And this is what Levels provides. And what our unique core competency is creating that software layer that lets people take this continuous data stream and really create a diet and lifestyle that optimizes our current performance, whether that's mental, physical, athletic, and then also sets us up for success in terms of the long term with chronic disease and with long-term longevity and health.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it almost seemed like the future when I stuck this Levels patch on my arm and it was a real injectable. Like, I feel like in the future, that's not going to be that strange to us, the same way that GPS doesn't seem strange to us now, but 20 years ago might have seemed like almost a little bit scary. Having something that has like a tiny little needle prick in my arm so that it can, test my blood seemed really futuristic, but it's incredible what kind of insights you can get from that just by having that constantly worn. And speaking of that sort of constant wearing, I think that's why I want to bring in Harpreet Rai Singh, one of the CEO of Oura, the smart ring company. You're also being able to really collect an unprecedented level of data just by being on people all the time. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the problem you're trying to solve specifically around sleep tracking.
Yeah. And thanks again, Josh, for putting this together. Awesome crew we have here, and really inspiring stories and missions. And, I think for Aura, we've really focused on, better sleep, helps you live just, healthier and better life. I think there's a lot, obviously, data out there showing, poor sleep will lead to, definitely you being hangry and grumpy and, not being able to think as clearly the next day, but also a lot of, frankly, long-term health risks, whether, I think poor sleep and specifically deep sleep in the early onset of Alzheimer's, there's been great research around that. Even just looking at the links between, unfortunately, cancer incident rates and poor sleep. And I think, frankly, what we're seeing, and I think what all three of us here, sort of, a company focused on sleep, a company focused on, sort of your metabolism, right, and a company focused on activity, is that consumers want more. They're seeing worse and worse health outcomes long term. They're seeing, sort of short term, their own pains and frustrations, and they want to know how they can take control of their health. And whether it's activity, whether it's sleep, whether it's your diet, everyone, all these three areas work together. And I think we're really happy to be doing our part, but we all need to work together to get us where we need to be as a society. um, I think the other thing I'd say that, I think we believe in at Aura is just the power of convenience and the power of data. I think every week we probably get well over, 2-3 million nights of data. And so if you just think about that, that's more than all the sleep labs combined in the US. And so just like I think, Casey was talking about and Moya was talking about, the levels of insights you can start to get when you're gathering data at that scale, is just really helpful, and frankly, we think can lead to better insights for the consumer, better understanding, that they can translate into, owning their health, like Casey said, and eventually, lead in a better and happier life. But yeah, it's been pretty cool to see, like, I think the COVID and the pandemic really accelerated this trend for consumers, bringing everything home, like Moya said. But I think it's been pretty cool to see that the consumer appetite for health and wellness has only just been increasing and accelerating.
Yeah, speaking of that, I want to bring in Chris Farmer, the founder of Signalfire, the venture fund where I work. He's had an incredible thesis on the healthcare space and all the ways that it's been changing for years. That's what led him to invest in Moya's company, Tempo, back at the seed stage. And so, Chris, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about sort of your thesis around these trends of connected health and data and continuous monitoring and where you see this all going.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me, Josh. I grew up in a world where, or in a family where my siblings are all in the healthcare world. My brother is actually chief strategy officer for CMS and is an echocardiologist by training, but also has a PhD in healthcare policy. And, just a huge believer from the conversations around the table that, so much of healthcare is about education and compliance and being able to sort of understand a bunch of anecdotal things and integrate them together in order to gain insights. There's a lot of comorbidity across different diseases, and a lot of it is lifestyle conditions based on, as we've been talking about, what you eat, how you sleep, how you exercise, and all these things are inputs into not just healthcare, is traditionally constructed, but wellness and actually enjoying life. And so I'm a big believer that there's an opportunity to get ahead of these things, that prevention is, one of the most important things for bringing down healthcare costs and for having people have higher quality of lives and living longer ultimately, and, preempting a lot of, serious conditions that you might develop. And so, and if you think about it, you go to a doctor and you maybe have 15 minutes with a doctor for your physical over the course of a year, unless you have, already developed, significant, uh, disease risk, or even the disease itself. And so being able to sort of understand these things on the consumer level, educating people through these different apps and understanding their own physiology, their own bodies, et cetera. And then also the continuous monitoring. At some point, a trainer or a doctor, it's the sort of seeing how these things develop over time and having the data to support that, as opposed to having something be self-reported by a consumer that may or may not understand the inputs, and they're googling stuff to try and figure it out or whatever. Whereas these amazing platforms like Aura, which I use personally, or Tempo, and sort of helping you to stay ahead of things by using proper form and technique so you actually get results, using the gamification and the social pieces of the community around it in order to drive compliance and continue, whether it's glucose monitoring, which is super complex, to sort of understand, the interaction between what you put in your body and how, and downstream health conditions. And so to any visibility you can get to that, and driving awareness alone is really important. But then as you start to join these data sets together, they become super powerful in getting a much more of a mosaic and a much more fulsome picture of someone's near-term health, but also potentially the long-term ramifications, so that you can get ahead of these things and be preemptive in avoiding, more serious conditions downstream.
Yeah, I think that really emblemizes this thesis that we have at Signalfire around what are these pillars to the future of more convenient and connected health. And I think of the five major ones being this concept of democratized, destigmatized, more affordable access to care via telehealth or streaming screens, the way that Tempo offers. And also we're investors in Bicycle Health, which is opioid dependence relief, as well as Form Health, which is around weight loss. And those are stigmatized conditions that people don't necessarily want to go into an office to talk about, or that people don't all have the means to afford some of these services. Like Moya was telling us, $150 an hour is really steep for pretty much everybody. And so the ability to offer that more affordably makes the audience for it so much wider. And when you're thinking about healthcare, that's critical. We can't have it be something that's just for the elite. And then you think of like the continuous automatic personalized data collection via wearables and smartphones that, I think Casey and Harpreet's companies really emblemize as well. The idea that if you can get data between doctors' visits, you have such a better picture of what's really going on. And you can't just rely on once you're already sick. You need that data before you're sick to be able to catch things proactively and be able to treat them when they're still small, and you can kind of nip them in the bud. And then there's the consumerization of the user experience and that reduction of reliance on pure willpower. That I think Tempo does a great job with. You don't have to drag yourself to the gym. That's such an important part of the activation energy of just actually working out, is just like transporting yourself to where it's you're supposed to do this kind of stuff. If you can do it at your home, if you can do it when you only have 15 minutes like before your next meeting, and you can actually get a little bit of a sweat on, that makes it so much more powerful. And the consumerization of these experiences, that they're easy to use, that they talk to you, that they can actually see you and understand you with the machine vision that's built into Tempo, that goes a long way to being able to make sure that people are doing things right. And that brings us to that next pillar of like keeping doctors and experts in the loop to maintain care quality. Like we can't just outsource health to robots and artificial intelligence. We need to still have experts in the loop to make sure that things aren't going wrong, because this stuff's just too it's too important. You can't move fast and break things when it comes to healthcare. A bug in a system like this can be really detrimental. And so the fact that Tempo can actually take those millions and millions of workouts, those tens of thousands of hours of live training sessions, and pour all that data into an algorithm so that it can actually benefit from all of those doctors' insights and all of those nutritionists and wellness experts' insights, I think that's really powerful. And then the last part is this patient revolution of controlling payments. So we recently did a podcast with the founders of Ro, the telehealth personal primary care pharmacy, and they're making it so much easier for your patients to actually choose what they pay for, and they're kind of sidestepping this broken insurance industry and allowing people to actually say, this is how much I want to pay. And by doing that, you give the power back to the patients to decide which services they want to use. And that means that the providers actually have to compete, rather than saying, oh, your employer pays for your health insurance, so the providers don't really care about your end user experience. By giving the patients back control of payments, then you suddenly have them back in the loop of saying this, getting to determine what is quality. And so if you're interested in that, I got a little secret for you guys. We're launching the Signalfire podcast, and it's out now. We haven't talked about it to anyone, but our first talk with the founders of Ro, which just raised hundreds of millions of dollars at a $500 million valuation, a huge valuation. That show just came out. So if you're interested, you can search for Signalfire on any of your favorite podcast apps, or you can go to signalfire.club to sign up to get alerts about our future shows like this, as well as this podcast. And we would love to have you, if you're interested, we'd love to have you part of the Signalfire Club. But I want to kick it back to you, Wayne, to talk a little bit about what you saw in Tempo in those early days, and the problem that you really saw it solving, and the idea of combining technology and the best of human trainers to create a more affordable, destigmatized, and accessible service.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Josh. I think Chris has summarized a lot of things well. For me, something that resonated personally was a point that Moya touched on, which is the democratization of a previously inaccessible service. I personally believed when I was a kid, the only way I was getting out of Detroit, and later where I lived in Minneapolis as a dumb, overrepresented minority, was getting good at sports. But we didn't have the money to pay a coach $150 an hour. And so, compressing the cost of that through AI, but also giving access to a remote trainer who could be anywhere, could be the world's best trainer in a specific area in Florida, and connecting them to some kid in Minnesota. I think that was that sort of transformation of the economics, and not just sort of replicating an experience in home. I think we've sort of talked about that theme before, where you're bringing a bunch of different experiences, whether it's actual weight training into the home or primary care in the home, but transforming it and enabling completely novel use cases, as sort of seen in this panel. That's something that was really interesting. And then I think maybe one thing to add that Moya in the early days did in a very different way, using, sort of to your point, Josh, data and AI to enable these new insights, was, as with any AI startup, how do you kind of bootstrap your initial set of training data? And I think he had a really interesting hack here, which might be interesting to hear about, partnering with gym equipment resellers abroad who could put these devices within the matter of a few months in 100 locations, uploading tens of gigabytes of data back to Tempo across many thousands of users and sessions, which also kind of got around a big issue around capital intensivity, right? The saying that it takes sort of $100 million to really get a consumer hardware business off the ground. But sort of one way to bootstrap there is to use a partner to kind of get to market first before taking on all the infrastructure. Whether it's getting paid for hardware right away from smaller production runs, having access to a pre-installed base of gym goers and not having to spend a lot of marketing upfront, or having a design partner who can lend development resources. Sort of an interesting way to stair step to what is typically a very expensive endeavor. Most consumer hardware businesses raise, say tens of millions before getting to market. And it meant that the company was in some ways more mature, and the core product was much more battle tested than your average D2C product.
Chris, I'd love to hear some of your questions here, because Wayne, I think you're absolutely right that understanding and getting out there so you have that data early and you aren't sort of starting flat-footed when you're trying to train these algorithms or understand a product that has to work right. Because if people are sort of depending their health on it, it can't function with errors, and it can't be trained with bad data. So, Chris, would love to hear your question.
Yeah, I'm curious for the founder panelists on how they're thinking about integrating with traditional health systems, and the doctor that's sort of aggregating these views into, helping a patient through, whether it's diabetes or sleep issues, or just incorporating that data into overall perspective on health. I'm curious what initiatives they're doing and where they see this going over time.
Moya, maybe you could kick us off, because I'd love to hear, are you guys helping figuring out ways to send Tempo data to your primary care doctor, or integrating it more deeply into the traditional health system?
So one of the biggest things for insurers has been just like, are people actually exercising? Like one of the things that happened with Fitbit is like, you could just put it in a washer and it'll count infinite steps. So like, are people actually exercising, and how much exercise are they doing? And one of the most important things we collect as well is just like, what is your active heart rate and what is your rest, and how long it takes for your your heart rate basically to recover. And one of the things we're able to share is just exercise, and what kind of exercise is actually helping people improve, and that it's actually being complied, and that people are exercising. So we're basically trying to figure out, how do we, where is this extremely helpful for doctors, and for certain insurers as well. Just like one of the biggest ways they can save is just like, are people actually complying and exercising? So that's one angle we've been looking at it from. Another one for us is where we think we can make a lot of value and change has been on physical therapy, and that is one of the areas that has been, there's the hardest amount of like compliance and people actually going home and doing the exercise that the therapist has given, has had actually one of the lowest compliance rates. Usually you'll be sent home and here's like a piece of paper and it has 5 exercises and they want you to do them, and most of the time people, when they get home, that paper is no longer even with them, and they just expect, oh, in a week or 2 weeks I'll go back to the physical therapist. And the thing is, you actually have to continue doing those exercises, and that the duration it takes for you to recover, if you were doing them, could be cut by 1/4 if you're actually complying. But most people will not do them at home. And one of the ways I've been excited about like how Tempo can help in that space is to a physical therapist say like, you actually cannot even schedule the next session unless I've seen that you were able to go and do this at home. And here's the thing, you can do it confidently at home because Tempo has built everything about how do we coach you to do an exercise and how to give you the feedback and show that you're making progress, and then share that data as well with the physical therapist saying, here's exactly what your client has done at home, and here's how many times they're able to do, and look at this very minute progress that you would not even be able to see with your eyes. They're actually making at home. I think we could really transform that experience.
That's such a cool idea. I love the idea that you have to do your homework with physical therapy before you can go back to your physical therapist. Because I know that I didn't do all of my physical therapy when I had my electric skateboard blowout accident, and I'm still paying for it. And I wish that I had had a better system to keep me honest.
Absolutely.
Casey, I would love to hear, what are you guys doing in terms of like integrating levels data with the traditional health system?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think products like Levels, which create software that generates these higher level insights about biometric data, I think can be hugely valuable for the doctor and healthcare systems and the doctor-patient relationship. And, in reality, doctors have virtually no time with their patients in our current system. They're often seeing 30 to 40 patients a day, literally, 15-minute visits. People have multiple chronic conditions. They really don't have time to be coaches, and they're not trained in nutrition. They're not trained in nutrition. We are not trained in nutrition or coaching. So the conversation around nutrition often goes, hey, you should eat healthier. And your cholesterol's high, your blood sugar's creeping up a little bit. You should eat healthier. And the patient says, I am eating healthy, nothing's working. And then, it's frustrating and we get nowhere. So Levels can provide a lot of value here in really being that technology on the ground that's helping the patient with that aspect of things. Because the reality is that health is not generated in a doctor's office. That is not where health comes from. Health is generated through the hundreds of micro decisions we make every single day about what we eat, when we eat, how much we sleep, how we respond to stress, how much we move our bodies. That's where health is created, and that's where Levels can help. And, doctors can't really help there, which can be disempowering as a doctor, honestly. When the vast majority of the conditions your patients have are related to nutrition, but you can't really help on nutrition, it's disempowering. But tech can really serve as a mediator there. And, when I was using CGM pre-Levels with my patients, they would come in with these Excel spreadsheets of their glucose data because there was no Levels, there was no software that surfaced these higher level insights that I could sort of take and talk to the patient about. So I'm pouring over raw data, like thousands of lines of, just because these glucose values are taken every 5 minutes. And sort of asking questions like, okay, and I was in a sort of boutique private practice at this point, and so I was spending a lot more time with the patient, so I had time to do this, but saying things like, hey, okay, so your glucose was a little higher this morning, so what was your exercise like yesterday? Like, how was your sleep? Like what led into this? It was just such a poor system, and I really came to have this thesis that in a lot of ways for complex things like glucose, which are multivariate, there's multivariate inputs in what is a glucose output. It's all these things. It's the sleep, it's the microbiome, it's stress, it's food timing, it's food pairing, it's movement. It's all these things. A human brain, a doctor's brain cannot actually put those multivariate inputs into a model and give really precise, intelligent outputs. A doctor can't just do the math and say, okay, well, 12% of the reason why your fasting glucose was higher this morning is because of the 45 minutes less of sleep you got last night. But software can do that. And so that's really what inspired me was, how can we take that burden, that cognitive load off doctors to basically do something that we are not equipped with our human brains to do and outsource that so that you just kind of get on a silver platter like, hey, these are the levers that went into, or these are the factors that went into this patient's or this person's data. And here are the levers that you should coach them about that are specific and unique to their bodies that are going to be most helpful for controlling that. For some people, it's going to be more about the sleep. For some people, it's going to be more about the macronutrient composition. So it really kind of it takes some of that cognitive burden off the doctor. And the last thing I'll say is that I do think it actually creates a healthier relationship between the patient and the doctor when you have this type of data, because instead of this conversation where the patient's going, I'm trying everything, nothing's working, your recommendations aren't working, you can actually sit down with real objective data, and you have this information to share that the patient actually owns, that's providing accountability and information for the patient. They're not coming in this paternalistic relationship where you're telling them what to do and what not to do. Their own data is telling them what to do and not to do. So they become the person with the agency and the power. And it's not this sort of strange hierarchical relationship that's unfortunately clouded by lack of good information. There's good information, the patient owns it, it creates a better conversation. And so I think all those things are really where I see this type of technology fitting in with empowering doctors and creating better relationships, not to mention, of course, the fact that I think as this becomes even more mainstream, as the outcomes data starts coming down the line about how this can help people even when they don't have necessarily a chronic condition, when like young, healthy people who want to just better understand their diet and lifestyle, and we start seeing in the research how this is benefiting people's lives, I think healthcare systems and payers are going to be very quick to incorporate this as a wellness benefit, realizing that the cost savings of keeping people out of overt metabolic dysfunction is monumental. And we've already definitely seen trends with interest in that type of thing. And it's very exciting to see. So I think there's a lot there, and I'm extremely hopeful for how these technologies are going to transform the healthcare system from the bottom up.
Yeah, I love the idea of empowering patients with their own data so that they can make trustable decisions and they're not just sort of referring and relying entirely on doctors who maybe don't have that much of insight into what's going on in between doctors' visits. Harpreet, I want to ask a little bit about how you guys are thinking about integrating Oura into the more traditional healthcare system, but also you guys have been integrating into the athletics system as well with like your big partnerships with the NBA around the bubble and all of that stuff. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about where you see that going.
Yeah. So it's definitely share a lot of the sentiment as both Casey and Moya. But yeah, I think from Aura, one thing I think we did pretty well as a company is we actually set up an open API, just from day one. And then the other thing we did is actually provide a platform for others to view your data. Now, we're GDPR compliant, and our company started in Europe, and so we take privacy really seriously. So you obviously have to allow them to consent to do that. But we have two dashboards for sort of the enterprise, or which we call one is Aura Teams, and the other one is Aura Health Risk Management. And yeah, frankly, we've been working with sports teams, sort of higher end doctors, doctors like Peter Attia or Michael Bruce, or even people like Matt Walker, that if people allow them to, can share their data. And we found that really helpful. I think a couple things we've also found, echoing to sort of Casey's earlier words, doctors are not trained on how to look at this data from wearables, right? Or anything coming off a tempo machine, or levels, some of that information from a levels app. And so that's not their fault. They went to medical school just like lots of us went to different types of schools, and they were taught to train and practice medicine a certain way. And so I think what we've tried to do is actually work with the healthcare system, mainly starting with researchers, to just get a lot of research out there. So we're one of the only wearables, I think, still, to actually show that, hey, our heart rate and heart rate variability is 99 and 98% correlated to an EKG. We were actually, I think, one of the first wearables to have an independent sleep staging done by SRI. It used to be called Stanford Research Institute, and we have some really exciting work there. That's following up on that. We published with UCSF some of our early work on COVID. And I think getting that credibility out there, then you start seeing a little bit more of the ecosystem. These forward-thinking doctors start to come and approach you too. But do agree. I was one of those, probably patients who Casey would have hated. Like, I tracked every single meal myself for 3 years in an Excel spreadsheet. I used to weigh my food. I tracked every rep. I literally, my first keto diet was 2009. I think I was doing intermittent fasting. For those of you who know, really, where I would say it started on the internet, on the Lean Gains forums. Martin Burkhan, for those who know, back like 2009, 2010. And I drove doctors wild, because I was like, getting my blood tests done, like, once a month, coming to them being like, well, this moved, that moved, here's my sleep. Like, look at this data, give me an answer. And, obviously they were like, hey, on to the next patient. Thank you. But I think, this is also why the healthcare system today is sort of broken, right? People are getting sicker. People don't have answers. To Casey's point, it's not empowering. And I think it's our job. We see it both from consumer demand and spend and wellness, right? I think, the medical system in the US is often quoted at like, near 20% of GDP and growing faster than GDP every single year for the last 20 years, right? On the other hand, now you have wellness, out-of-pocket spend that's even greater, I think nearing $5 trillion and growing perhaps even faster. So you're seeing it from like, all the unfortunate, metrics there are in our long-term healthcare system. We wait till we're sick to go to the doctor, right? The, check engine light, it hasn't just gone off. The engine is broken down. And so you're seeing that consumer demand. But I do think, like you were saying, Josh, earlier, it's our job as companies to figure out how we can all work together here because we're going to need it. We're going to need to do that to turn this around.
Yeah, I love that analogy that like we need a check engine light for our bodies, not just to wait until there's like smoke coming out of the engine and the thing refuses to run, which is kind of how a lot of our modern healthcare system works. And that brings me to a question of just like, what are you guys most mad about in the current healthcare system? I think I would love to hear, Casey, I know you have an incredible thesis around like the processed food space that maybe you could give us quickly, but I would love to hear a little bit about what still needs to be fixed that maybe even if not your companies, other companies in the space might have an opportunity to address.
Yeah, so I think
just go hard on
yeah,
this.
the question was what makes us most angry or frustrated. Was that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh gosh, where to begin? But I think that for me, it comes down to healthcare economics is what's so frustrating to me. Right now, we are still in a system where doctors and hospitals and pharmaceutical companies all make money if people are sick. So we actually don't make money off of a healthy patient by and large. We make money when people are sick and they come to the doctor and they need interventions done. Surgery is one of the most lucrative things a hospital can do. They're able to bill tens of thousands of dollars. And surgery is essentially a condition that has gone off the rails and has gone to an end state. And you need to do something incredibly dramatic, which is surgery. And I'm a former surgeon, a head and neck surgeon. So this is really what pushed me out of surgery was, feeling very disillusioned with the fact that I felt there were many opportunities to really help my patients get fundamentally healthy, really understand the root cause that was causing their issues. But we don't have the time or the training to do that. We have the training to help them when they're end of the line, end stage, turn around, do a big surgery, bill a lot. And we code in medicine for these late stage symptoms and manifestations. That's what the billing system is like. You code for these late stage things and you make money off codes. And so, we don't even have codes for the root causes of a lot of these conditions like chronic inflammation or metabolic dysfunction, early metabolic dysfunctions. We can't even bill for those as diagnostic codes. And so the system is just really set up to wait until people are fulminantly ill and then profit a lot off of them. And so I don't think the average doctor is walking around thinking this way. I think that doctors are extremely well-intentioned. I think that hospital systems are by and large well-intentioned, but it is very hard to overcome the subtle push of economic incentives that essentially favor people being sick. And, the truth is that chronic illness, which is what is ravaging our country, contributing to 90% of our nearly $4 trillion healthcare costs, like Harpreet was mentioning, these conditions are essentially a faucet of money for everyone in healthcare. They are conditions that we consider to be incurable and that need to be managed essentially for the rest of your life with medication and ultimately in many cases, surgery, and that do not cause your actual immediate death, but cause a slow and highly morbid death. So from an economic perspective, these conditions are absolutely fabulous from an economic perspective. And that's really sad. So that's kind of, I would say, the most frustrating thing. And I think the system I think there's positive movement. We're moving a little bit more towards a value-based care system. You're seeing some movement there as opposed to this fee-for-service system that I'm really talking about, where you get paid for doing, this bias towards action, where you spend 40 times more money studying how to treat cancer compared to research on how to prevent cancer. Which is crazy to me. And, so this value based care system takes into account this model, which is value is outcomes over cost. You want high value care, which is good outcomes over low cost. And as we move more towards value based care, what you naturally are led to are things like optimizing sleep, optimizing nutrition, optimizing stress management, optimizing exercise, because these things are fairly low cost and are incredibly high value. If someone eats well, sleeps well, stresses well, moves well, they're really very unlikely to get a chronic condition. And so I think that companies, like everyone up here, like that's where these types of digital health companies really fit into a value-based care system. And some of the really smart hospital systems are realizing this. You know, Thomas Jefferson University, an incredibly innovative hospital system run by Dr. Stephen Klasko, who's written some great books like on healthcare. They have actually a venture wing of the hospital that's investing in startups that are like creating the digital health products that are going to fit well into a value-based care system. So I think that's fabulous, and there's a lot to be optimistic about. But that would be the most frustrating thing to me, is the way that the healthcare economics were set up to essentially financially incentivize having sick patients.
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem. The idea that we spend so much more on treating these diseases instead of how to actually prevent them seems like a really bad way for us to ever get out of like our healthcare problems as a country. Moya, I'd love to hear your perspective here. Maybe that's about, what's frustrating about the gym experience or even gym culture and how you guys are
Yeah.
changing that with Tempo. Because I think it's so interesting that, I think of gyms and like weightlifting as being a pretty like daunting and inaccessible culture that I always felt like I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to be lifting these dinky little weights, and everyone's going to be like, who are these gym rats? Are going to be laughing at me. And that kind of pushed me away from ever wanting to lift outside of using like machines at gyms, and why I got so excited about things like Tempo and Peloton. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about like what you wanted just to fix in the gym world, or what
Yeah.
you found frustrating.
It, it's so interesting, the parallels between the healthcare industry and incentives, and gyms and incentives as well, right? Because gyms are definitely in the business of get as many people to sign up and do everything that you can do to make them not show up to the gym anymore, because they don't even have room for you to show up. So a gym usually wants to like sign up to 2,000 something people for membership, but they really can only fit, their economics work and the space works if only 500 of those people actually show up and the rest don't show up, and they don't want you to show up to gyms. And like, what can you expect of a system that's like that, where the gyms have been built to put all these niceties that they know will make you like sign up for as many years as possible but not show up? Like, there's no reason for a gym to have a sauna and a jacuzzi and three different floors of all these things, except they want you to come in and be like, sign me up for a 3-year membership here and has a discount. One of the funniest ones for me is you could literally buy a 4-year 24-hour membership from Costco. Like, it's there, it's on sale, and so that they can get the money and hope that you never even show up, not even one day. So obviously a system like that leads to 50% churn every single year, and they have to re-win all those members all over again, and just it's not set up to make you succeed. And that's where it goes to the culture as well. So you show up to a gym the next day and you have this area, especially like the strength training area, where everyone there looks like they know exactly what they're doing, and they're lifting really, really heavy weights, and there's no guidance on how to get started. There is no area where it's like, oh, here's what you should be doing as like your first 2-week program. You'll probably go, you'll grab some pieces, some equipment, you'll lift some weights, you'll do a push-up, and then you go home and you find that you don't have a six-pack the next day, and you're like, well, I wasn't really comfortable there in the first place. And we find out that people like basically start declining in the number of visits 2 to 3 times after going, because they're like, I just don't fit in there, I don't know what to do, and I also didn't see any results. So expectations also, like, I don't know, you're not going to see a six-pack after one day at a gym where you picked up some weights and went home. But like, if a gym really wanted you to succeed, I could easily see where your first day, it's a free session that walks you through a gym, figures out your goals, sets you up with realistic goals, and teaches you about the equipment. But that's if they wanted you to succeed, where they clearly don't want you to succeed. And hence, it's what it is today with this really, really high churn. And what's amazing about Tempo is, first of all, it's very convenient and it's at home, but it starts with a personal trainer, right? And it understands where you are and where do you want to go. And you would start working out. And within 2 to 3 sessions, we've assessed you. And we also say, we've seen 100 other Joshes, and we know exactly where you are and where you want to get. And here's an optimal program you should be going on, and then constantly motivating you to get you to come back. And our business only succeeds when you come back, right? Our business thrives on the membership and how long you continue that membership. And people have to see value if they're going to continue renewing the membership. So the incentives are get people to work out as many times as possible so they could retain as long as possible. And I think for once we've been able to now have a system that thrives on your success. And that's what I'm very excited about with when it comes to this home fitness space, and what I'm really frustrated about when it comes to gyms.
That's so crazy that like gyms blatantly try to sign up more people than they can even really fit, and then seem to actively try to push you away from understanding or learning or feeling truly onboarded. The only times I've ever really felt like onboarded at a gym is when they were like very, very heavy-handedly trying to get me to like sign up for a personal training regimen where I'm going to be paying like $150 a month on top, or $150 a week on top of my gym membership, which always seemed like, wait, I just paid all this money. I thought that was supposed to be what got me fit. And they're like, oh, no, that's just the start. And it definitely seems like a bit of a scam.
Oh, absolutely. And we've even tried where we've said, here's how you can increase the number of people that can, continue retaining at a gym and make their onboarding experience like be a lot better. And we would offer them, they're like, oh, we have absolutely no interest in it. And then we said, oh, how about your trainers in their free time because again, in the middle of the day, trainers basically are paid minimum wage and they're cleaning the gym because that's not when they have clients. So we're like, we can have that time be used to help so many more people. And clearly the trainers are also not interested. So I'm like, wow, this system is not set up for success. And the funniest example for me is just of completely how backwards it is Planet Fitness, and they're offering a free pizza every Wednesday. And I'm like, how could a gym be offering you pizza right after you finish working out? Like how far away from goals and reality can a gym be in terms of like the incentives to get you to sign up?
It's almost like the dentist giving you a lollipop afterwards. I'm like, are you trying to get me to come back here?
They
Harpreet,
literally do it in front of you. Yep.
right? Harpreet, what about you? Especially in like the sleep industry, like we hear so much about like sleep, like bedding and pillows and all of and mattresses, and like the whole mattress startup space was this explosion. And it seemed like a lot of it was really focused on like, oh, we can get you better sleep. But would love to hear like what you're frustrated about in the sleep industry.
Yeah. Or I was going to say like CBD gummies or melatonin gummies. And, I think a lot of what Moya hit on, like, there's a lot of, I would say there's definitely a lot of gimmicks in the industry. And I think it's sort of sad on how we've been sold health as, consumers, really, right? It's sort of a, six pack abs, use the ab wheel and, you'll have this, 30-day miracle turnaround, or, vice versa, look at any pharmaceutical ad, right? And it's like, take this pill and all of a sudden all these things will be resolved. I think really to drive empowerment, you got to start with education and understanding. So I think instead of trying to make it so simple for the customer and sexy, like try to be real with them. Like Moya was talking about, like we need encouragement from each other, right? We need to build a society of helping us improve and learn. And I think that's something that I think we can all do better at. We have this saying at Aura, it's health is a daily practice, right? And a lot of these things aren't glamorous, but it's making the time for them, understanding why they're important, why your body reacts the way it does, right? How this is going to even help you tomorrow, but then also over time. I think it really is where the industry needs to go. I could spend hours talking about, MLR ratios and sort of value-based care, really only hits once you're above 65 in the healthcare insurance industry. But I think trying to just keep it simple here, and I think really it's sort of either way. I think consumers are being sold a facade most of the time. some, again, whether you're a pharmaceutical company or traditional exercise equipment. And I think if we create a community together, empowering people, teaching them, and giving them access to data so they can understand, I think we're going to change the industry, and I think all three of us already are.
That's a beautiful sentiment, and I would love to see like more of the startups on different edges that don't really compete, but instead are filling in these different holes in the space to get together and be able to help with educating and maybe cross pollinating users. Because I'm sure that tempo would be even more effective if you're able to tell what's going on inside of your body with your metabolism, or what's going on after your workout during your sleep. Chris, I would love to ask you about what other opportunities you see in this space. What else do you think are you frustrated by in the healthcare space, and do you want to see fixed by startups? Do you have a request for startup in the telehealth or fitness or connected health space?
Yeah, I think, Casey touched on it earlier, is that, there's not incentives in the healthcare system um, to really focus on prevention. And I think one of the biggest mistakes we've made as a country in the healthcare system is tying it to the employer. And so if you change jobs every 18 to 24 months, if the payback period isn't within that time frame, there's no ROI for the insurer, and they basically just pass the hot potato to the next, to the next employer, to the next insurer, which of course, is a round robin going back and forth to each other. And so as a result of that, you look all these short-term fixes as opposed to long-term education and care. And I also think the education system, like we don't do a great job of teaching people while they're young, how to really, live a healthy, life more holistically. And so I think it's a combination of education that we've got to sort of make up a lot of ground, and just alignment of incentives, where we over test people, we over medicate, we do all of these things because of, lawsuits and all sorts of issues that we have in the healthcare industry. And we don't do enough of like just basic education and prevention and encouraging people and incentives to do the things early on that could lead to much healthier lifestyles and far fewer serious conditions downstream. And I think it's so many parts. The food industry is complicit in this, um, as well as sort of the healthcare system, and they're all so intertwined. It's really complex, and so there's no like one area to point to, but I think we need a comprehensive overhaul and much more accessibility to people earlier in the cycle, across the entire, population, in order for this to happen. And so I think it's going to have to come from a revolution, because I think that the incumbent system is so backwards in so many ways, that I'm really hopeful that some of these consumer companies and motivated people who can afford to buy and use these devices will start to put pressure on the health system for doctors to sort of interpret this data, and eventually, like a lot of technology, it'll become much more accessible and much more economic with faster paybacks, and therefore the traditional system will be forced to sort of adapt, or basically lose to new companies that are better aligned with long-term health outcomes and healthier living in between.
Yeah, we've really got way out of alignment following this law change around World War II. And we talked about this on the podcast with Ro. And if you want to hear more about this, you can check out the Signal Fire podcast on whatever podcast app you like, or go to signalfire.club. But really what happened was that, in the early 40s, we passed this Income Stabilization Act, which froze wages because we were trying to protect against inflation. But what ended up happening is we excluded healthcare benefits from being included in that like frozen wage calculation. And instead, it became this sort of additional form of compensation. And then it became like sort of the most tax advantageous way of receiving health insurance. But what ended up happening was that because your employer was the one that controlled your health care instead of the actual end patient, those providers sort of ceased to care about the end user experience, or actually, making it affordable, because you weren't the one paying. It was sort of your employer, and they didn't really have a lot of choice in the matter. And I think that caused this massive disalignment of incentives. But Chris, you brought up a great great point that like health education needs to start sooner. Like I feel like the health classes I had in school were like garbage. They were teaching me the like food pyramid and like that I should be eating like 6, servings of grains and having, bread with every and pasta and cereal with every meal, which I did growing up, and it definitely caused like some childhood obesity for me. And I'm like furious that they allowed me to be taught this. And so I would love to see some startup tackling more of this childhood health education space. Wayne, what are some other opportunities that you're seeing that like are other things that you're frustrated with around the fitness and connected health space where you think there could be new approaches that startups might be able to take on?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the areas that we've been monitoring is this transition point between the hospital and in-home care. I think Moya touched on this a bit with the physical therapy example, which is fantastic. But another personal example I've unfortunately seen it. It can be overwhelming when you're discharged, and you need to figure out how to take care of yourself at home as someone with a chronic condition. And order a BiPAP or CPAP machine, figure out what's covered by insurance. Follow a very specific set of medical protocols. And because this is now outside the four walls of the hospital, it's often very overlooked and underserved. So, there's companies that are building tools directly for consumers and for the healthcare practitioners like nurses who are helping make that transition through, for example, streamlining the ordering workflow for durable medical supplies and bridging some of the education gap at that critical moment in time.
So in a second, I want to ask sort of a final word from some of our panelists about what they would like to see happen next, and also their advice to any other entrepreneurs out there who are trying to approach these spaces. Because when they're regulated, when there are giant incumbents, when it seems like they're like technologically hard problems, and especially around hardware, like it's pretty much most people say that like hardware is not the best business to be in terms of startups, and yet you guys are each succeeding so quickly, and it's really remarkable seeing how consumers are really adopting this new approach, and that especially if you're bundling in subscriptions the way that I think Levels and Tempo do, that there's a huge opportunity to build a great business as well as build something that really improves people's lives. So we'd love to hear your guys' advice for the entrepreneurs in a second, but just to go through a little bit more of the story, for Moya, his family immigrated. There was healthcare problems in his family. They didn't have a lot of money at the time, and then there's a boiler explosion that ended up like basically making you guys homeless, and you only had $400 to pay rent. But fortunately, at least the Red Cross put you in a shelter. You guys had food stamps, and you started to go to the YMCA to spend some time. And while you came for the ping pong, you ended up staying because these trainers said that like, hey, you come every day and you never step foot in the gym. We'll train you for free instead of charging you $150 an hour if you go back to school. And doing that, the gym helped you believe in yourself, see the real potential of how personal training can affect somebody's life. You became a personal trainer yourself after high school, ended up training people to pay for college, met your co-founder as one of your clients, and then you guys embarked on this mission to make training more accessible, because it's ridiculous that only people who can pay $150 an hour should be able to have this close and intimate relationship with somebody who can help you with your health and your fitness. And by building Tempo, which uses it's a screen that you put in your home, it comes with the weights, and it actually uses machine vision to detect your form and posture, so it can give you feedback to tell you if you're doing an exercise wrong, if you're not dipping low enough, if your knees are in the wrong spot, if you're off balance, which can really make the difference between not only getting better but also staying safe and avoiding injuries, which is something I worry about some other healthcare systems and home gym units. When they don't have that machine vision and they can't actually tell if you're doing it right, I worry that they might not be able to keep me from hurting myself. And instead, because you guys are trained on millions of workouts and tens of thousands of hours of training data, you're able to actually make these recommendations. And you went from zero to suddenly an $85 million run rate, raised this $220 million round, and you flipped the retention stats on their head. Instead of it being 20% of people that actually stick with their gym, 80% of people continue to use their Tempo weekly, and that's a massive shift in the ease of healthcare. And then when it came to Levels, Casey told us about how individuals need to be the owners of their own healthcare data. That the nutrition is this infuriatingly open loop system where you don't really know what happens. Like, you might be able to tell what calories you put in, but what actually influenced that weight, and just having a scale and occasional cholesterol checks really aren't sufficient to understand what's going on. And that 88% of American adults have a metabolism dysfunction, and instead of really being able to address those before they turn into fatigue and poor endurance and obesity and heart disease and anxiety and depression and all of the terrible sort of long-term consequences of those metabolic dysfunctions, instead of waiting until you're really in a bad state, being able to understand earlier, what's going on with your body, what's going on inside of it, and saying that, like, recognizing that our industrialized food process and system have really screwed things up for us. We used to imbibe a pound of refined sugar per year, and now we're imbibing 150 pounds of refined sugar per year. And of course, that's going to cause all sorts of problems. And so the idea that levels can actually monitor your glucose levels, monitor your metabolism, and give you a heads up about what kinds of foods really affect you poorly and which ones you should feel comfortable eating to be able to maintain that optimal health could really keep you out of that eventual hospital. And that, I think, is what's really important there. And then we talked to Harpreet about about Oura and their smart ring, which can really detect sleep and be able to understand that cancer is one of the things that's most coupled with poor sleep. And that by actually understanding how that's happening before you get into those states is really important. And having the data to be able to make your own hypotheses and be able to arm yourself with that data is so important. And we talked a little bit about the democratization of access, and how we're going to be able to combine these incredible new hardware devices with the existing healthcare system. The Tempo is considering how to help doctors know if you're actually doing your workouts, or help physical therapists assign exercises and know that you did them, so you can't schedule another session until you've actually done those physical therapy exercises, which I know I didn't do when there was nobody watching me. And that health doesn't have to only happen in the doctor's office, as Casey said, that the doctors can't tell what's going on at home. They can't help you there. And by giving patients the data themselves, they can trust in their own decisions. They're not just like WebMDing what's wrong with them. They're actually empowered with the data to know what's going to happen next. And Harpreet, you talked about sports teams and hiring doctors, and how Oura Ring helped power the NBA bubble and allowed these athletes to be able to detect if they were getting sick before that happened, which was really important to being able to help those seasons go on. And that we really need this sort of check engine light rather than waiting for the car to break down when it comes to our bodies. And that you guys are working on getting more research out there to show how this quantified self data can really improve people. And now we're talking about what happens next. That the healthcare system just has these misaligned incentives. That they code for these late stage symptoms instead of the early stage symptoms. They bill you based on things that happen way after they can really prevent you from having these big issues. And then you end up having to have this expensive surgery, or end up with this chronic condition that's a huge moneymaker for doctors and hospitals, but is pretty much the worst thing that could happen to you and your lifestyle. And I think that it's really impressive to see new hospitals moving in the right direction, having venture wings to try out new experiments, and thinking about how do they make sure that you get your care before you need it, but when you want it before you need it. And that gyms, Moya, you talked to us about the sort of scams around gyms, that they want to sign up 2,000 people but only have space for 500 people to show up, and that there's really no onboarding for these gyms. They kind of make a scary atmosphere where you don't really know the machines, you don't know what you should be doing to get to your goals, and that ends up to this really high churn. But because it's aspirational, people wish they were working out, they keep on with those subscriptions, they end up sort of just draining their own money without actually getting any healthier. And that across the board, there's just this facade of health where people talk about these things that whether it's fad diets, or different sleep aids and chemicals and medications, or whether it's just buying a gym membership and that not actually getting you healthy. That we need to move beyond the facade and get back to proper incentives for health insurance, for fitness, for doctors and hospitals, and get back to where we actually see health as something that's preventative, and that we start spending more on preventing disease and less on treating it later. And so thank you guys so much for joining us today. It's been really exciting. And so I want to get a last word from each of you. Maybe we can start with Harpreet about what advice you might have to other entrepreneurs who are trying to build something in this space, or what you hope to see happen next.
Yeah, I think, and thanks for the summary. That was great. I think for entrepreneurs, I would say if you're facing a problem, focus on that problem and understand how big it is. I think, I started out of college doing investment banking. I was 21 years old. I gained 50 pounds that year, about a pound a week, lost a bunch of hair. And for the first time in my life at 21, 22, couldn't fall asleep when I came home at night. And, I remember looking at Google Trends when it first came out and being like, wait, let me look at sleep and see how many people are querying that. And let me look at running. And to like my surprise was like, holy cow, more people are querying sleep on Google than querying running. And so, I think if you're experiencing a pain point, most likely others are too. And then just, understand it, how big it is, and all the different facets for it. I think for what I think, what to see in the industry next, Josh, you hit on a lot of it. I think, this is such a big problem and so multifaceted. How we're going to work with all the different healthcare system entities, and improve, honestly, bring value-based care more downstream to become more preventative, I think is the future. And I think all of us, again, have ways of doing that. And think it's pretty darn exciting times. So I think we're going to, as a consumer, I feel like, why do I have to go somewhere to understand my wellness before I'm sick and then have to go to my doctor when I am sick? And I feel like those two worlds are going to keep colliding. It's a bad consumer experience. It's a bad fiscal experience for our country, right? And I think, and obviously it's a terrible outcome experience today. So it's going to get resolved, and it's going to require both us thinking as entrepreneurs and working with the existing establishments to make that happen.
Casey, any advice for entrepreneurs out there, and anything you hope to see happen next? Maybe something hopeful, because I think it's been a fair amount of doom and gloom, because there is a lot of problems in the healthcare industry, but I think we are starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel.
Totally. And yeah, +1 to what Harpreet said. That summary, Josh, was brilliant. And I'm so impressed. That's some amazing hosting there. And I just really second what Harpreet said. I am very optimistic. I think you are seeing these incredible movements in people creating technology to create the system they want, that really empowers people. I would say there's three things that I think I'm sort of seeing for the future with this type of technology. I think one is really like integrations of data. When you can pair different wellness data streams together in a really intelligent way, you can create incredible higher level insights that really helps us dial in behavior. So whether that's pairing sleep with glucose, activity data with glucose, micronutrient data with glucose, whatever it is, I think those integrations are powerful. I think the second would be community. I mean, health is achieved in community, and the more we can just kind of build those out in a meaningful way, I think the more we're going to see rapid progress in people achieving their goals and minimizing their pain points. So community built into all aspects of health tech. And then I think a third thing is like, how ambient can we make this technology? So how in the background? I'm someone who is personally not a fan of being latched to technology all the time. I want to be in nature, camping, off grid, away from screens. That's the state I want to be in. But that does not mean that I can't benefit from technology that's really in the background and that's not in my face all the time, but that's still giving me exactly what I need to live my healthiest life. So really thinking through how to make it unobtrusive and fit into normal life. This is wellness. This is people who are already fairly healthy. And so you can't have it being, hitting you over the head all the time. It just needs to blend into your life really beautifully. And so I think that's a really challenge and opportunity for health tech. And then I think just for entrepreneurs thinking about getting into this space, one thing I would just say is that I think there's really two ways to think about going into health tech, and they're often merged, but they're actually quite different. One is approaching improving the health system and improving health and whatever it is, fitness, through basically making broken systems more efficient. Like how to basically make the system that right now is totally broken and not working more efficient. And like an example of this would be like creating technology for electronic health records that makes it easier for a doctor to see these 30 patients a day or whatever, or to do their charting for those 30 patients a day or whatever. Then there's this other side of things, which is really rebuilding the system altogether with tools and technology that actually empower true fundamental health. And I've been on both sides of this, and trust me, I think your life will be more fulfilled doing the latter, building the tools and technology that actually empower real health. And health is about behavior. Health is generated through choices. So that technology needs to, at all levels, help people understand their bodies and make those personalized, better choices. So that's just kind of, I think health tech kind of gets lumped together, but there's really two different paths, and I can you can pretty much sort of lump a company into, I think, either of those. And I really think we need more people thinking about how to get people fundamentally healthy, like everyone at this panel, I think, is trying to do. So so those are kind of my final concluding thoughts there.
Chris or Wayne, any things you're hopeful about or that you want to pass on to entrepreneurs who are trying to build in this space?
I think it's a bunch of things. First off, always think through the consumer experience and education as you give them access to the data, because it's going to be overwhelming for people to understand it if they're not Harpreet or excuse me, or trained as data scientists. Um, and so making it accessible, and then also making sure that you have people like Casey on your team who are medical practitioners that can help you to understand, your end audience, the true medical perspective on this, and understand how the ecosystem, payer incentives, all those types of things work. Because we see lots of people who approach it from like a clean slate, with technology, but they don't understand enough about what the incentives are that make whatever they're trying to do that should work not work. And so I really think it's about the interdisciplinary pieces of understanding, how the ecosystem works and consumer psychology and how to motivate consumers. And you got to pull all those things together to ensure that there's education and compliance to ultimately get to the kind of outcomes you want. And so I think it's a really exciting time in healthcare, because one of the silver linings of the pandemic was that it forced the ecosystem to adopt technology, because the traditional healthcare system was overwhelmed and frankly unsafe for a lot of people to go to a doctor's office, to go to an ER, those types of things. And so it sort of opened Pandora's box in a lot of ways to technologies that they've been reticent to adopt, to sort of rapidly look at telemedicine or look at remote monitoring, those types of things. So I think it's created big cracks in the system. That's an incredibly exciting time for startups to sort of really look at healthcare again, and that the maturation of technologies like Oura, like Levels, like Tempo and All Health and a bunch of other companies that are doing things in this ecosystem, to bring data and more sort of continuous monitoring. I think it opens a huge unlock to really change the landscape of healthcare permanently.
I think that's brilliantly said. Yeah, I absolutely think the consumer user experience, making sure you have real medical and medical admin experience on your teams, and understanding that sort of all the bets are off now that COVID has massively accelerated the telehealth space. Wayne, any last hopes or advice?
Yeah, I defer to a lot of what's been said by the absolutely amazing founders here, but I'd echo, we've seen founders in the portfolio have success taking a systems level approach to company building and reinventing healthcare end to end, versus being sort of myopic in scope and the problem they're tackling, which can sort of risk making yourself a small boat, privy to the massive wins, of healthcare ecosystem that, as everyone's pointed out, has some very fundamental misalignment of incentives. And I think this panel has done an incredible job of illuminating parts of that playbook, on the cutting edge as it's being defined.
And finally, Moya, would love to hear your advice, from your incredible story, all of your perseverance from going from homeless to raising $220 million in this latest round. Any advice or hopes that you have for the future of this fitness industry?
I'm by nature very, very optimistic, because you're talking to a person who was homeless and had absolutely nothing, and it was able to, make all that change and be able to, create a company. And like, I didn't have any network or anything. And like, being able to get investors to back me and continue, believing and seeing the change that I've been able to achieve, and with an incredible team. And here in the Bay Area, that I'm very optimistic about, things moving for the better, and about how much impact entrepreneurs can make, no matter how small they might think when they're starting initially, to where they'll be in the end. But like, one of the most important pieces of advice that I can give entrepreneurs is, and this cannot be said enough, is you have to really do something you're incredibly passionate about, because startups are very hard and you will go through so many cycles. But if you really are passionate about it, first of all, you're going to do something amazing, because you will want to really solve this problem and not come up with another gimmick, as we've seen history create with people creating companies before. where they just look for opportunities and like, how can I best take advantage of this opportunity? No, when you're really passionate about a problem, you will create a genuinely amazing solution, and the world will reward you for it. And you will, endure through it and actually go through the obstacles, and you'll be very successful. So find something you're very passionate about. Another thing is that hardware is, becoming really sexy now, and it's actually growing. There was this whole phase where everybody was into how much more can we do on the phone, and everybody wanted to do every tracking on the phone and a lot more. Everybody's mindset was just about the phone, and I think phones have become very distracting and don't really. They can be a great vehicle with helping with behavior change, but you can now create a dedicated hardware product. People are excited about buying something that makes a statement, whether it's about sleep tracking, and it's like, here's this ring and it's going to help me sleep, focus and remind me that I bought this and it's attached to me now, and I'm going to care about tracking my sleep. Or with the glucose monitoring, with what Casey and Levels are doing. And when it comes to fitness and tempo, you have like a whole gym in your home, and it reminds you every time you walk past it that, hey, you committed, you want to change your style, and you've committed to fitness, so embark on this and let's get working out. So I think hardware is actually, don't be really afraid of it. People are excited to buy hardware, and especially if you're going to unlock something that can do something innovative there. As when it comes to the future, I'm very excited about seeing all of this come together with what Harpreet is doing with Oura, and Casey with Levels. In that, I want to be able to see fitness and sleep and diet all really come together, because they truly, truly shine when it's all working together. We already know that if you sleep 7 hours, that recovery, it will lead to a much better workout. It'll also change your mood and change your body and your own metabolism. So it really all comes together. So I think by having all of these, all of us, everybody that's here on this panel, and thank you, Josh, for bringing us all together, there's a whole lot more that we can unlock together. And I think what this will do is it will change the industry in the future about, like, if you really create value for the customer and make things a lot simpler and easier to digest, and actually create value, the world will adopt it. And I excited about seeing so many more startups move in this way. We're proving that if you build something great and it's great to the customer, they will come. So I'm excited to see so many more founders do good in the world, and that it will actually work out.
Thank you for that incredible story of your personal journey. Thank you for those amazing insights to all of our panelists for helping us today. Whether it's the Tempo home gym, a screen that actually sees you work out and can give you feedback, Casey and Levels, the metabolic glucose monitor that can really give you insights of what's going on inside your body, Harpreet and the Oura Smart Ring, and being able to understand what's going on with your health and sleep at night. I just want to thank you guys all so much for being here, because I think if you all combine forces, and if more people join this sort of our audacious group of builders saying they want to build hardware to solve their own problems, to fix this problem for our whole community, and realize that health is not what happens at the hospital. Health is what happens at home, and that if we have the data to empower ourselves to make those decisions, we're going to lead not just healthier, but a lot happier lives too. So thank you guys all for joining us here today. If you're building something special in the future of fitness, telehealth, we would love to hear about it at Signalfire. We're a $1 billion venture fund investing seed to Series B, and we really love hearing about these incredible founders who are building to solve their own problems. Our superpower is in recruiting. Our Beacon talent engine has helped us make 1,000 job candidate intros to our portfolio companies in just a year, and that's what that helped earn us a 96 NPS. And so if you're interested in hearing about what we might be able to do for you, would love to hear your pitch. Find a warm intro or DM me on Twitter. Would love to hear what you're building. And if you want to get the recording of this show, we would love to have you as part of the Signalfire Club. So just go to signalfire.club and you can subscribe to get the podcast. Also, you can tap on the little Signalfire button at the top of this room and join our Signalfire Club so that you can get notifications about our future Clubhouse rooms. We have some incredible ones coming up, whether that's future of new industries, investment theses, recruiting guides, and how you can get better at being a founder yourself. We would love to have you as part of our club. So please tap that button at the top, join the Signalfire Club, go to signalfire.club, join and get our newsletter, our podcast, and more content from us. But really, we're just so so thankful to have all of your time, because you could have spent this time working out. Hopefully some of you are on a walk right now and are actually getting your steps in and staying healthy. But go check out Oura, Levels, and especially Tempo. Such an amazing way to stay fit without having to drag yourself to the gym. It has been an absolute pleasure from us here at Signal Fire, me, Chris, and Wayne. We love having you here, and we're just so thankful for your time. Please have a wonderful